Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome back. How are ya? I hope you're having a great day. This is Modern Leadership, and you are in for a real treat. Our topic today is performance through thought mastery and mental focus. As you know, I am a huge believer that personal development always precedes professional development or professional growth. You have to get what's between your ears right before you can experience the type of success your potential demands. And so today I've invited my new friend, Kim Ades, to the show. Kim is president and founder of Frame of Mind Coaching and JournalEngine software. She's an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, a coach, and on top of all that, a mother of 5. She is recognized as one of North America's foremost experts on performance through thought mastery. And she uses this unique philosophy and her quirky coaching style to help leaders shift their thinking for extraordinary results and, of course, personal transformations. Kim, it's so great to have you on Modern Leadership. How are you today?
I'm great. I loved your introduction, especially the line where you said, I'm your new friend. I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, well, that's, when we spend this time together, it develops a real bond, doesn't it? I mean, I know you do a lot of podcasting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And there are some times when that bond kind of supersedes, like it goes way beyond just that conversation.
Yeah, and let's shoot for that. That's our goal today.
Okay, I'm with you.
Wonderful. Well, we heard a bit about your professional life. What did we miss by way of personal?
Well, you got the fact that I'm the mother of 5. I didn't give birth to all 5 of them, but I have all 5 of them. I got remarried about 10 years ago, and I had 2 kids of my own. My husband had 3 kids, and we became one big blended, merged family. And so for me, they're all my kids, but more than anything, I feed them all, I clothe them all, I'm with them every step of the way. So that's a big, huge part of my life.
Yeah, and I can't even count to 5. I can't imagine with all the stuff you've got going on with your coaching, with the software product that we'll talk about in a little bit, and all the speaking that you do, that with 5 kids, you've just got to be going crazy. How do you keep it all together?
Well, I don't try to keep it all together. What I try to do is just be where I am. So when I'm at home, I'm at home. I focus on the things that are related to home. And when I'm at work, I focus on the things that are related to work. And I really just try to not be everything, but just be where I am. But I want to tell you something, like the focus of your podcast is on leadership. And I've been reflecting on this for years and years and years. And I think that leadership and parenting are very, very similar. They go hand in hand. And I think that where parents make mistakes, leaders make mistakes. And I've often thought of that. And I think that parenting is a really good model for teaching leaders how to lead.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I've got to tell you, this is about episode, let's say 205 total that we've done on the podcast. The first 120 episodes came under the podcast name of Family Before Fortune, which was all about building the life of your dreams with the people you love, that you can have success without sacrificing your family relationships. And then last year we rebranded, and so now we're coming under the name of Modern Leadership. But that's what I see as modern leadership, that it all ties in together. We are whole individuals, and the things we do at work affect the things we do at home and vice versa. So couldn't agree with you more. And I'm so excited, Kim, to get into this topic of, performance through mental mastery. But I got to ask you, take me back. How did this become something of interest to you, a passion of yours?
Well, before my company now is called Frame of Mind Coaching. Before I did this, I used to own a different company. I used to own a software company where we would build simulation-based assessments. And the purpose of those assessments was to help companies make better hiring decisions. And that was when simulations weren't cool yet. Like, they weren't popular. They weren't a thing. So we were kind of on the leading edge of that. And one of the things we did is we tested hundreds of thousands of people. And what we were interested in specifically was what makes a top performer? What makes someone perform at a higher level in comparison to everyone else? And we tested their personality, we tested their skill sets, we tested their IQ, we tested it all and really examined the data. And one of the things that stood out for us is that in all cases, in other words, it didn't matter what industry, what position, what role, the one key factor that jumped out over and above everything else was a person's emotional resilience. So if they had a higher degree of emotional resilience, they were more likely to succeed. And if we take a look at what is emotional resilience, it's the ability to bounce back from adversity with speed and agility. And when we studied it even further, we discovered it's not just that, it's being able to leverage the adversity, do something with it that's positive and turns it into an advantage. And so that piece of information was very important for me. And I thought, well, if emotional resilience is the key, how do you help someone build their emotional resilience? What is emotional resilience exactly?
And that was my thought as you were talking about that was, okay, I'm all on board here. I mean, you've done the research, but I want to ask you, are you born with it or how do we develop it?
Well, emotional resilience really is a function of your thinking. So when a bad thing happens to you, how do you interpret it? What perspective do you have? What do you make it mean? Like, what does it say about you? And you get to decide all that. So it has to do with your thinking. So can emotional resilience be built? Yes. Do some people have a naturally stronger tendency to bounce back from adversity faster with greater ease? Yes. But it's kind of like a body, right? Some people are born with great genes and the great metabolism, et cetera. It's the same idea. Some people need to work out a whole lot longer and a whole lot harder in order to get to the same place. But at the end of the day, great physical health requires attention, just like your emotional resilience.
And so how do we give our attention to emotional resilience? What are some of the activities that we can do to really enhance this, to really body build our emotional intelligence?
So let's make a distinction between emotional intelligence and resilience, right? So emotional intelligence is being able to read situations well, being able to understand where people are coming from, and all of that is very important. Emotional resilience is a little bit different, and it really alludes to how you handle it when you experience blows. Right? That's the distinction. And so how do you build your emotional resilience? One of the most important things is to create systems in your world that allow you to look at yourself, allow you to observe, and allow you to do a little bit of analysis on how you think about yourself, the world around you, the events taking place, the other people in your world, your relationships, your accomplishments, your failures, etc. So if you can install or put in place a series of systems that allow you to reflect and look at how you react to things and say, hey, that reaction wasn't necessarily the best, what you're doing is you're implementing slight changes to increase your resilience. But in order for that to take place, you have to be able to see yourself first.
So this is this introspective look at yourself and this analysis of how you're doing. How do you avoid the biases of like rose-colored glasses or gray-colored glasses that you see yourself either more positive than you should or more negative than you should and get a poor or inaccurate reading on where you stand?
So there's two things that I would look at. A, your actual results, because those are very indicative of how you're doing. So it could be results in your business, results in your relationship, results in your health, just your results. How are you doing? Are the results you see the results you want to be seeing? And if not, there's a disconnect, right? Then the second thing is your emotional state. So if you feel negatively, if you feel any negative emotion, bad, sad, mad, pissed off, annoyed, frustrated, all those emotions are telling you that you're pointing in the other direction. In other words, you're pointing away from what it is that you really want. So those are the two strongest indicators. And those are pretty easy to see. They're unbiased.
Well, and as you think about this, I mean, the more you pump your mind full of negativity, the more you look down on yourself, the more you reinforce that within yourself, that even though it's inaccurate, the more you dwell on it, the stronger it's going to become. On the flip side, it's also the same with positivity and looking at yourself, and moving in the right direction. The more that you reinforce that, the more that your mind is going to find evidences of that in your life and continue to build on that and strengthen that. So this is a fascinating conversation, Kim, and I want to shift it just slightly because I know you talk a lot about coaching, and I know you talk about, some of the skills and steps of really being a powerful coach. And the reason I want to talk about this is because whether you're a leader, whether you're a mentor, whether you're the CEO, or whether you're just, starting your climb on the ladder, everybody has the opportunity to have influence in their surroundings. And I think of that as having some some aspects of coaching. So let's dive into some of these steps of powerful coaching.
Okay. So interestingly enough, my philosophy is that the most important element of coaching someone else is you. And so before you even begin coaching, step one is to pay attention to how you're entering a coaching conversation and make sure that you're cleaning up any perspectives, thoughts, biases, points of view that are colored or negative or will taint the conversation. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. And I use this when I present. So one day I came home from work and, I have 5 kids, and I walk into my family room and I see one of the 5 kids lying on my leather couch with his shoes on. He has his computer on his belly. On the floor are empty chip bags, water bottles, like it's a mess, his broken iPad. And on the armrest of the leather couch, I see these 2 things. I wasn't quite sure what they were. As I got closer, I understood that they were 2 pieces of cheddar cheese right there on my couch. So I walk in, and what goes on in my mind? Like, oh my God, my synapses are firing off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so the dialogue that goes on in my head is, what the heck is going on here? Like, you're being disrespectful, you're not respecting the property, you're being lazy, all that kind of stuff. And so my first step in coaching anybody is to check that story at the door, right? Like, take it out of the conversation. Notice that I'm having it and going, hold on a minute. I'm assuming all kinds of negative things here. I'm seeing the person in front of me in the worst possible light. And if that's my view, if that's my vision, there is no coaching happening here. I have to suspend that. And I've got to check that story at the door.
So I think in a traditional coaching sense, or in a scheduled appointment, you could kind of prepare yourself for that. But what happens when somebody stumbles into your office, or you stumble upon them, and you all of a sudden you're in a coaching moment without any forethought, without any preparation for it? How do you check yourself at the door?
Well, that's a beautiful conversation. And when you lead people, one of the most important things is assume positive intent. So you said something before, we look for evidence to support our beliefs. So in this case, I walked in and I saw visual evidence that something was really, really wrong, right? And what I needed to do is say, hold on a minute, what evidence do I want to look for? I want to find evidence that he's a good kid, that he's doing the right things, that he's, I can be proud of him. And so, one of the quick checks you want to do is say to yourself, assume positive intent. I have all this huge story, this whole dialogue happening in my brain about what could be happening. And I need to, for a second, put that aside and give this person an opportunity to show up positively. And I need to assume positive intent.
And this goes back to that introspection that we talked about, where it's really identifying, you may not be perfect at this. Your first couple of tries, it may take you a little while to get into the habit of assuming the positive. But as you introspectively think about it and really focus on it and realize, okay, how could I have approached the situation differently? I know I'm right along with you in this story. I'm walking into your house and I'm having the same reaction that you are. And now I'm trying to pause and think positivity. And let's talk about the next step then in this powerful coaching process.
So step 2 is get their story. So in the case of my son, I walk in, his name is Lewis. I say to him, Lewis, what are you doing? Right? Get the story. So don't assume he's doing something terrible, horrible, and awful. Ask him. Right? What are you doing? What's going on? What's happening? Tell me, what the experience was like. You had a bad conversation with your client. What happened? Right? Get the information.
Does this ever trigger defensiveness immediately? Like, I can imagine your son sitting there and you say, what are you doing? And all of a sudden this triggers this defensiveness. What do you mean what I'm doing? I'm doing my homework, or I'm doing what you told me to do. I'm sitting quietly in the living room.
Right. Well, when you are making a practice of assuming positive intent and you ask a question like that, they don't get defensive because they understand you're inquiring. However, if in the past it turned into an attack, then sure, they'll get defensive. So this component is very big, is to check your story at the door. And when you ask a question, you're asking because you're interested, you're seeking information, you're trying to understand the story and what's going on.
And you can hear it in their voice. I mean, when their intent is positive and they ask the question, hey, what's going on? You could hear it, the inflection in the voice that says, hey, this isn't accusatory or attacking. This is truly a question of progressing the conversation.
Yeah, pure interest. In this case, in the case of my son, he said, hey, I'm designing a skateboard for my sister. Her birthday's around the corner. Well, all of a sudden he wasn't so lazy, not so inconsiderate, not so, right? All of a sudden he was this great kid.
Okay, so he had positive intent, but he still had cheese on the couch. So, I mean, there was still some behavior that was not positive, right?
Sure. So what did I do? I went to the kitchen. I got a plate. I put the cheese on the plate. I said, show me what you're doing. He showed me this amazing design. And now that I've acknowledged him, now that I've spent the time with him, now that I didn't jump down his throat for his behavior, now he's open to hearing me say, cheese goes on plates. Here's what happens when you put cheese directly on a leather couch.
Which takes us now to step number 3 in this powerful coaching model.
So step number 3 is this. So, and let me go back to step number 2 for a minute. It's get the story. Number 3 is dig under the story. So oftentimes when you're sitting, let's say with one of your team members in your organization and you're a leader and you're asking for the story, they usually give you a small component of the story. Right? They give you what you think you want to hear or what they think you want to hear. They just give you just the brief facts. When you dig under the story, you want to get more than the facts. You want to get all the juicy details because in all the juicy details, you're understanding the big picture. You're understanding where they're coming from. You're starting to understand their tendencies, how they think about things. You're starting to piece together patterns. You're starting to understand it. A lot of people say, well, what does it look like to dig under the story? And I say to them, do you remember when you had a friend in high school and he went to the mall and he bumped into this girl he had a wild crush on, and he came back and he said, Jake, guess what? I just bumped into Susie. And you start asking questions. Really, where did you see her? And he starts telling you, what was she wearing? Who was she with? What did you say? What did she say? And then what happened? Are you going to see her again? Did you kiss her? And so on and so on. You want all the juicy details, the ones that he's not necessarily giving to you up front.
And so let me ask you why he's not giving them to us up front. And my assumption is because we all operate within, a sphere of knowledge that we know. And sometimes because we know it so well and we've been through it, we've lived through it, there's this natural assumption that other people are already up with us in the information, in the facts. And so we don't share as much as needs to be shared to catch the person up. That's my assumption. But let me ask you, why do we only get part of the story? Why do we need to dig deeper?
Well, okay, so those are two different questions, right? Why do we only get part of the story? There could be lots of reasons. They might not think you're interested. They might not think it's relevant. They might think, well, here is the story. All the rest isn't the story. So they don't do it to hold back necessarily. They do it because you've asked a specific question and I'm answering a specific question, right? And so now the question becomes, why do you need more of the story? So a person might come to you and say, man, I really had a hard time with this client. I was up really late with him last night and finally we fixed the problem, thinking that what you care about is the client and fixing the problem. You might ask a different question. Well, you worked late last night. How did your wife feel about that? He didn't bring his wife into the equation, but that could have a great deal of importance.
As you are higher up in the formal leadership chain, like let's say within a company, I would guess that it's more difficult to kind of dig into this. So I'm the CEO and I go in and talk to somebody who's, maybe a couple rungs on the ladder below me. And because of intimidation or because of, just virtue of my position within the company, sharing some of those juicy details might be very difficult. So me as the leader, I need to work extra hard to pull them out.
Well, so that's where, so we started with assume positive intent. I'm going to give you something further called assigning positive intent. And so as a leader, if I say to you, hey, I see this about you, you're working really hard and maybe you're still struggling. But if I assign an intention to you that says this, I know you want to succeed. I know you're doing your best. I know you want to make a contribution. I know you're here to make a difference. And I assign all of that to you. Now, if I see you struggling, you're going to come clean and clear. You're going to be much more transparent with me because you're going to know what I want for you is your success, your well-being, your thriving. Because when you thrive, my company thrives.
Assume and assign positive intent. All right, let's talk about step number 4.
So step number 4 is identify their beliefs. Why? Because beliefs are really the foundation, the crux, the centerpiece of your life. In other words, that's what rules the day. So what I believe to be true will drive my behaviors. A lot of coaching focuses on behaviors. So even a few minutes ago, when we talked about the cheese, you said, well, there's still some behaviors. And as a coach, behaviors give me insight to people's thinking, but it's the thinking that really dominates and holds dominion over people's behaviors. So I don't want to just change behaviors. I want to look at what drives behaviors. What is the thinking that causes you to behave the way you do? Because if your behavior isn't leading to the right outcomes, in other words, the outcomes you're looking for, we need to understand why.
And this is my light bulb moment for this episode of the podcast because what you said makes so much sense to me. And I love the way that you put it, that beliefs drive behavior. And when behaviors need to change, our focus need not be on the behavior itself, but on the beliefs that are driving that behavior. And so how do we, help people to understand, or how do we help them grow in their beliefs and change in their beliefs? For example, we've got the cheese going on the couch here, and if we continue our example, how do we help that belief change?
Well, in this example, he might think, well, it's efficient, right? I didn't want to dirty a dish, or I didn't want to create extra work for myself, or whatever it is, right? It could be a number of things, or I am being creative in my son's glorious creative way. And that is a creative expression of mine, right? It could be a number of things. And so if we were to look at it in more of a work kind of setting, someone may have the belief that, I see 2 of my team members fighting and I don't want to interfere because I don't want to be in conflict. And if I interfere, I'm going to make things worse. That's a belief. Or I don't want to take on this task because I don't think I have the experience or the education to take that on. So I'm going to play small and I'm not going to put up my hand. I'm not going to take initiative because I think I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to fail. That's a belief that drives behavior.
And as you create a culture within your organization of assuming positive intent, then as you start to focus on helping people adjust their beliefs in order to affect positive behavioral change, it'll be done in a constructive, positive, growing way and not a criticizing, demeaning, or insulting way. And so I love that. How about number 5 when it comes to our powerful coaching steps?
So number 5 is challenge their beliefs. So if I believe something to be true, and let's just take it, I look terrible in a bathing suit, and I'm just using that as an example, then what am I going to do? Am I going to put on my bathing suit and go gloriously swimming in the ocean? Probably not. Right? So that's a belief that needs to be challenged. Just the belief. I don't have to force someone to wear a bathing suit. I don't need to say, let's go shopping. I have to look at what they believe to be true about what's beautiful and what's not beautiful, about what they see about themselves, about whether they need to be perfect, about whether it's okay to have physical flaws and still go live a wonderful life. Right? All that stuff. And I need to start challenging them a little bit so that their beliefs line up with their greatest desires and goals, which is to live this amazing life, doing whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it.
And so let's circle back and just go through quickly the 5 steps of powerful coaching. We've got to pay attention to how we enter the conversation, get their story, then go deeper, right? Dig under their story to get more than just the facts, but the juicy details. Step 4 then is identify their beliefs, and step 5 is to challenge their beliefs. So this leads me to my next thought, and that is, these are strategies that good leaders use. What are some of the other thinking strategies of phenomenal leaders?
So what I have discovered is that, extraordinary leaders may all achieve different things, but they come to the table with a similar set of approaches. We'll call them thinking strategies in order to reach their goals. So number 1, we just finished talking about their beliefs, is they challenge their own beliefs all the time. So when they feel trapped, when they feel frustrated, when they feel stuck, they ask themselves one critical question. And that question is, what do I believe to be true about this this circumstance, situation, this person, this thing that's causing me to feel frustrated or stuck? What do I believe to be true?
And so when you look at beliefs like that, and you're diving into it, some of these beliefs are core beliefs that you've had since infancy. I mean, since childhood, and as you start to challenge this can be a struggle. This can be a challenging exercise for a leader to go through, can it not?
It can be challenging. And so one of the ways, obviously, we work with leaders, we work with those highly driven individuals from a coaching standpoint, so we make it easier. But for those people who want to do it on their own, one of the things we do when we coach, and I encourage anybody who's listening to do it too, is to journal. So when you write down that question, what do I believe to be true about this situation that's causing me to feel stuck? And you write down all your beliefs. It could be, I don't have enough money. I can't access money. I don't have enough time. I don't have the reason, whatever it is, right? Whatever your beliefs are, you want to write them down. And then you want to ask the question, is this belief true? Is it absolutely true? Can it possibly be untrue? And if there's a possibility that it's not true, all of a sudden that belief doesn't hold as much power, does it?
This is the second light bulb moment, Kim, and we don't often have double light bulbs in the same episode.
Wow.
So this is awesome. Okay, so I'm journaling. I just wrote down all the beliefs that I have that are limiting beliefs or negative beliefs that I have. And now I just start.
You don't think they're limiting when you write them down. You think that they're just beliefs. You think that they're just the facts. You just think this is the way it is. It's true. I don't have enough money. Look at my bank account. It's a fact. So a lot of times we don't look at our beliefs we don't look at our beliefs as limiting. We just look at them as this is the way the world operates. This is the truth of my life.
As reality. But then as you start to pick away at them a little bit, and I loved the way you phrased it. You said, is there any possibility, is there any scenario or in existence that you can see that this belief is untrue? So for example, my bank account has no money in it. And so my belief is that, I'm not valuable or I'm not worth any money. And now you start picking this away and you start tearing it away smallly. And all of a sudden, it starts opening up to you. Now, you talk about journaling. I know you're big into journaling, and this is something we talk about awful lot on the Modern Leadership Podcast. But why for you is journaling so vitally important and such a big step in this challenging our own personal beliefs?
So can we get back to that question? Because you asked me another question. We're not finished answering that one, which is, what are the thinking strategies of extraordinary leaders? So can we put this one on hold for like 3 minutes?
If you're telling me that we're going to have 3 light bulbs this episode, my mind's going to be blown. But sure, we can of course do that.
I'm shooting for at least 4. How's that? Okay. So number 1 is they challenge their own beliefs. They challenge their thinking. Number 2 is they have a different sense for resources. So we call it, yes, they're resourceful. And you're thinking, I knew that. That's not a light bulb moment. Except for this, is that extraordinary leaders don't imagine, don't believe, don't think that there's a scarcity or a lack of anything. There's no shortage of money. There's no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of expertise anywhere. And they believe that they have the right to access that resource. So that thinking is significantly different from the rest of the world.
Yeah, it is. And, this is one of those topics that I'm a big believer in this. I'm a huge believer in abundance. I hate the scarcity mentality. And so as you talk about it with me, this seems almost, obvious. But I know that there are those listening out there that this is a challenge for them, that for them to recognize and to accept in their life that they're valuable to receive the resources. The resources are not for others, they're for them. And whether that's money, whether it's time, whether it's success, whatever it may be, you have access to it. And I love this idea.
So that's number 2. And number 3 is that extraordinary leaders focus like with blinders on what they really, really want, and they don't get distracted. So if what they want is to create a business where they are not critical to the business, they work with absolute focus on putting mechanisms, systems, people in place so that they are able to remove themselves from the equation. So if you look at someone like Richard Branson, he does that with excellence. right? He doesn't want to get caught in the weeds. That's not what his strength is. That's not what he brings to the table.
And how do we as entrepreneurs who are often, we suffer from this, squirrel syndrome or this shiny object syndrome, how do we as entrepreneurs really identify what we need to focus on? And then how do we stay true to our focus path without, chasing off on all the shiny objects that we see often as business leaders?
So here's where journaling comes back into the conversation, is that I always ask my clients, and I might ask your listeners, the question, what is it that you really, really want? And why are there two reallys? Is because it's not something that you think you should want. It's not something that the world wants for you or your parents think you should want, right? It's not like that. It's what does your heart really, truly, deeply want? And not that that doesn't change. It does sometimes. But if you're asking that question all the time, then the answer comes out to say, hey, if this is what I want, why am I working on that? They don't match.
And so this is our segue into journaling then. And so let's talk about this journaling and why you feel it's so vitally important.
So from a coaching standpoint, and I'll kind of go back, right? When I first started coaching people, I thought, hey, you know what? I think I could be a good coach. I'm not really sure, but I have some insecurities around it. Number one is I wanted to be a powerful coach. I don't mean like muscle power, but I mean I wanted to make a massive difference
Impact.
in people's, yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be one of those coaches that people forgot after 5 minutes. I wanted to have a lifelong permanent impact. And I thought, how do we do that? How do we really do that? And I thought if I could simply see if I could get into the hearts and minds of people and understand the dialogue they're having with themselves that they never share with anybody, now I'm into something interesting and now I'm into something good. So when I first started coaching and I asked people to journal, it was because I was insecure. It's because I wasn't sure I could make that impact without that data, without that information. Little did I know where it was going to lead me, because at the end of the day, I started to understand that not only was that data really critical, like I don't know how people coach without it, honestly, because what I'm doing is in the first 10 weeks of coaching, they're journaling every single day, even on the weekends, even on vacation, every day. There's no time off from this. So as a coach, I get to know my clients extremely well, very intimately, and I'm collecting a whole bunch of data about how they think across a number of situations, not just at work, but at home, with their kids, with their spouses, with their family members, with their friends, in their community. I'm seeing how they operate and how they react and respond and think about everything they encounter. And what I'm able to do is piece together patterns. I notice when they fall. And I notice when they soar. I notice the conditions under which they're totally happy and the conditions under which they become miserable. And all that information is extremely valuable for me to coach them accurately and effectively and quickly. For me, speed is very important. The other thing that journaling does, so I'm talking to you every single day through your journal, is I build a relationship with you that is unprecedented, right? I'm getting to know you like nobody else has ever gotten to know you before. What does that do? It builds an intimacy that allows us to travel a great distance in a short period of time. The last piece about journaling, and I think this is important, is it has nothing to do with the coach, is that when let's say you were the coaching client, if you were journaling, what happens? You start to learn about yourself. You start to express yourself. And you know what? After 6 weeks or 10 weeks, you go back and you read what you started with 10 weeks ago. You witness your transformation. You witness your change. You start to understand what you're writing down. And from a third party perspective, you're able to look at it and go, man, I fell into that trap again, or there's my lousy thinking taking me away from what it is that I want. And I am going to course correct on my own. So journaling allows me to manage my thinking and my emotions very effectively.
And I couldn't agree more. In fact, in my life, journaling has had probably one of the key drivers of change in my life is the ability to kind of look back and see how I've grown, seen the challenges that I experience, and mostly just kind of look at the way that I approach the world, my thinking. Now, Kim, this is a fascinating conversation. I love having it with you. I look at our time and boy, we have flown through the time. Before we let you go, want to run through a couple of quick rapid fire answers to a section we call Learning from Leaders. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. So what are you reading? What's on your Kindle or bedside table?
So right now I'm reading a book called Factfulness. I don't know if you've heard about it. Bill Gates gave a copy to every single graduate this year. It's written by a gentleman named Hans Rosling, and it's really about the fact that all the news that we hear and see has us believing that the world is in a terrible state, but in fact, it's really improved over the years. So it's a very interesting book.
Absolutely. I love this idea. I'm going to have to pick up a copy myself. How about your leadership superpower?
So I did take your assessment, and it says that my superpower is, what was it?
Inspiration.
Yeah, inspirational leader. I think it's a bit different, though, because I think that's a very general term. For me, I think my own superpower is really looking at conventional wisdom and questioning it and looking at it and saying, okay, hold on a minute. Like, everybody thinks this way. Is that accurate? Is that accurate? Is that true?
And I'm a big believer in the blue ocean strategy. And really, that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, you're talking about spending your time in a place where nobody is yet. You're leading the charge and doing it differently. Is that not right?
Well, I can't help it, right? Like, so, I'll give you an example. The whole entire world thinks that empathy is a good thing. Do you agree?
I do.
Okay, except that in coaching and leadership, I would propose to you that empathy actually is quite dangerous. So let me give you an example. And before we get into it, let me define empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is an emotional experience. It's putting yourself in the shoes of someone else and emotionally experiencing their feelings.
Uh-oh, you're getting into their story now.
Oh, exactly. So what happens? So imagine you're walking by and you see someone drowning in a pool. What are their feelings? They're desperate. They are in a state of panic. They're breathless. They're experiencing terror. And if you have empathy in that moment, you completely disarm yourself, or in other words, you disqualify yourself from being able to help them because now you're in a state of panic and you're experiencing terror.
Yeah, you need to be on a higher level. You need to be able to pull them up, and especially in a coaching relationship.
Exactly. So in order for me to be able to help them, I need compassion. I need to see that they need my help. I need to acknowledge that they're drowning and say, hold on, grab my arm, I got you. But I also have to have a vision that I can help them and that they can be safely out of this pool. And if I can't have that, if I get trapped in empathy, then we're both drowning. And that's a big problem.
What a great light bulb moment. All right, next question. How about a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra that you live by?
Live by, teach, what you focus on grows. That's it. Simple one.
Put your attention and your intention in the direction you want to go. All right, final question. The book that you most often gift to your friends, family, or colleagues?
It's a book called The Art of Possibility by a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Zander, who was at the time the conductor for the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. Amazing, amazing book.
Wonderful. And we'll link all of this up on the show notes. Before we let you go, Kim, can you please share with us how we can learn more about you and find out more about this journaling process that you've got?
Absolutely. Best way to find me is go to frameofmindcoaching.com. And if you want to learn more about journaling, learn more about us, learn more about yourself, right on the front page, we have what's called the Frame of Mind Coaching Assessment. And you click the link. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions, including journaling questions. So start there. Start doing some self-reflective work. And after you're done, that whole assessment, all the questions will go to an amazing person on our team who will invite you to have a call with them to go over your journals and your questions together. It's an amazing experience. That alone will cause you to look at your beliefs and understand how they are affecting you both positively and negatively.
Kim, we're going through a lot of light bulbs here on this episode. Sure appreciate your time and the expertise that you bring to the modern leadership audience. Thank you so much for being this week's guest expert.
Thank you for having me. It was absolutely so much fun.
All right, my friends, what did you think of that? So glad to have Kim on the show today, and so much value. I mean, we were talking light bulbs every other second on this show. And of course, when we talk about coaching, no matter what career you choose, no matter what occupation, no matter what path you go down, if you want to be a leader, you're going to have to be a coach. You're going to have to learn these aspects, these traits, these qualities of a good coach. And so I appreciate Kim coming on the show. And of course, everything that we talked about in this episode of the podcast can be found on the show notes, jakeacarlson.com/ML85, episode 85. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days and even better life. And of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.